I'm Gus Pelogia, and this is SEO in 2024.
Gus, what's your number one SEO tip for 2024?
My number one SEO tip for 2024 is to think like a product manager.
Okay, so there are many different ways that you can think like a product manager. I had a quick look beforehand, and there are different blog posts on how you do that as well. I'm sure you've got your own perspective. But another perspective is I also asked GPT, and then it also came up with 14 different points, so which is probably a bit too much to be going over. Their first point was user-centric focus. But what would your way of describing what thinking like a product manager involves?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it's about following a process of discovery, testing, and seeing how the things that you're doing, if they actually have an impact or not. So let's say if you want to give an example that we want to improve indexation on a website. So that's your hypothesis that you have to deal, you have things or ways to fix it. So you're going to start with a discovery phase. Okay, what are the possible things we can do to solve this problem? So one way would be to add more internal links to new or old pages on the website that are not getting indexed. So there are tons of directions that you can do this. It depends on the size of your website and depends on the resources that you have. But I would always start with a hypothesis and the ways that you have to fix this, and always put everything on paper, because what is in your head is very different from what is on the CMO's head or your manager's head or your client's head. So having all of those things documented, it makes a lot clearer what you want to do and why you're doing it and how you want to measure as well.
So how do you start with your hypothesis? Because there's no point in coming up with something that is just plucked from thin air. I'm sure you have a reasonably well-established hypothesis based upon some kind of criteria.
Yeah, so I usually just start browsing around, really. Let's say an easier place to start is Google just released a new metric, or Google is saying that something works or doesn't work. So let's say you want to add more structured data on your website because you think that's going to help you rank better. Now, everybody knows that Google accepts some types of structured data and doesn't accept or doesn't read some other types. You might question that and say, I believe that using Wikipedia links on my same as is actually relevant, or adding links to different types of pages through using, I don't know, an about field or something like this would be helpful. So that's your hypothesis. Or even more simple, we all know that internal links help with SEO. So the more links you give to a page and the anchor that you choose, they also play a role into how Google reads that. One link's enough? Probably not. Well, what is the angle? You need a 50, you need 100, or you need a lot more? So you build that hypothesis that, let's say you need at least extra 50 internal links to see if that page can move up. So you're going to find ways to add those links. You want to do that manually. You want to do that programmatically. You want to use different ways to do that. So I think it's clear to have a problem to solve, and then you have different hypotheses on how you can solve it based on the size of your company and the resources that you have. And I think the part that is the hardest one, that we usually don't do that well, or it's more like we believe that this is what's working or that is working, is to the actual measuring of these results, right? Because if you're doing 10 things at the same time, it could have been any of them. And usually before I started thinking like a PM, I would actually just credit all the things that we were doing, right? We are doing some more internal links. We improved page speed. We added structured data, and we did a PR campaign. So all those things together are moving the needle. It is true, to some extent, all those things are helping. But once you start thinking like a PM, you will actually try to isolate each one of those things and say, is this what is driving my increase in traffic or revenue, or it's not? Because your hypothesis might also be wrong.
Okay, so you've gone through your discovery page, you've gone through your discovery phase, you've selected your hypothesis, and then you've moved on to testing. So how do you decide what to test? How many elements do you include in a test, and how do you know when your test has actually come to some kind of conclusion?
Yeah, so I try to test one big thing at a time. So let's say if you're adding authors to a group of pages, you created author pages, you're detailing who are those people, where they're qualified to write about this, or you're going to have a separate test where you're going to add tons of links to specific high converting pages, or you have another group that you're just going to add. Now we don't have FAQ structured that anymore, but let's say if you want to add pricing on titles, right? You want to see if people will click more and convert more if they see the price before they go to the website. So I try to run one of those things per time. So you can run in different groups of pages, but don't run everything with everyone at the same time, because then you can't really isolate. We use an algorithm called causal impact that I've seen a lot of other companies, there are SEO tools that do things like that as well, or at least similar to this. But the idea is that you're going to create a test group, which are the pages, let's say, that you decided to add price in the title, and a control group, which is an equivalent group of pages that historically, let's say the last 6 months, they've been performing the same way in terms of traffic. And once you made that change, that's how you're going to say, okay, ideally, the group that you made the change is actually going up. And that difference is the impact that your change actually had on the traffic increase. Maybe both groups are growing at the same time. So even though you did something, you could just have done nothing and the traffic would go up anyway. So I like to play with that kind of mentality and try those type of things to really prove the impact of the certain thing that you're doing.
It's one thing coming up with a winner of your test, proof that something's likely to work. And it's another thing if you work in a large organization to actually sell that conclusion internally. So how does thinking like a product manager make it easier, make it more likely to be able to actually get what you want to do implemented?
So something that I learned in the last year is to write product requirement documents. And for me, this was a huge game changer. Before that, I would put a lot of ideas. Let's say if I want to explain something to a client, I would put some nice slides and spend a lot of time making them pretty to explain what we wanted to do. But that didn't necessarily had a real hypothesis or a methodology to test. And sometimes I feel now that they would like substance versus a PRD that is in a fully written document. You might add some images to help explain the idea, but you have a clear problem, a clear hypothesis. You have estimations of what it can achieve. You have a section for questions from everybody. So you're going to have your CMO, your director, your manager to come in while you're still on with that idea on paper. They can come in and say, what is this? What is that? I don't like this, or something else should be incorporated. So you'll start getting that buy-in before the idea gets to start moving, right? Maybe you have this great idea to implement something, and your developers might come in and say, actually, we cannot do this until we make a platform improvement, or we can't do this until we change to a new CMS, right? Those are all fictional examples, but you need to bring everyone into the room. Physically, it's hard these days, but I think the PRD is a way to really expand your idea and get that buy-in before you start doing it. Developers might come in and say, what you're saying, you're oversimplifying, or they might say there's a better way to do this. So getting that buy-in, it's very exciting, and you get clarity before you actually start building things.
Are there any downsides to thinking like a product manager? Because I'm sure many SEOs hearing what you're saying would think, I don't want to be spending my time persuading people that I have to do something. I just want to focus on doing the SEO stuff, getting it done. And that's where I can make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the size of the company and how difficult it is to sell certain things. I find it very useful even to myself now when I'm writing one of these documents, and first that you're like, oh, we can just release this feature real quick. And then realized a few months later, even before I had to write PRDs, that I would work and release something, and later realized like, oh, we shouldn't have released this to every page because now we can't prove that certain growth happened because of this. So the feature is there, the traffic and the conversions are there, but I can't really show that this happened because of what I did. Now, if you work in a company that you don't need to prove this, or if your clients are just interested in the results you can give to them, that's fine. But you might get into a situation that you don't have the resources to do all the things that you want, or you might just spend a lot of time doing something that is not really what's going to move the needle.
Now, something else that product managers are generally more aware of is market awareness, maybe a more commercial awareness, what other businesses are perhaps doing, how their products benchmark against the competition. Can SEOs learn something from this as well?
I think we can learn loads from it. I recently released a feature that it was on an A/B test, and it was a traditional A/B test. So we were only showing to percentage of users, and we could compare how people were behaving on the page on our test group and then the control group. And it turns out that they were doing almost the same. So the hypothesis that we had wasn't really there. So it's an interesting way to look at things from a different angle. We do, let's say, internal links because we want those pages to read better, but we might forget that sometimes that real people are coming to these pages and they might look at something and think it doesn't make sense, and they might lose trust on your website or on your brand. So I think having that awareness and thinking with a more open eye, not an open eye, just thinking of a bit more broad, it does help you to look at things in a different way.
And something else I was thinking of is measurable goals as well, because I think product managers have certain tasks or periods of time where they certainly have to evolve the product roadmap, and SEOs to a certain degree are focusing on something that doesn't have an end point. So it's more challenging sometimes to establish goals when, first of all, the goalposts are moved by perhaps Google or other search engines. And then secondly, there's always something else that can be improved. So, I mean, should SEOs be harnessing the power of measurable goals a little bit more?
I think so. Like, I try to treat every initiative that I have as something that has an end. So at the end, it might just be working to the point that you know that a specific thing actually works and what is the potential impact behind it. Once you prove that, then you can continue iterating and release your V2 or release improvements to what you're doing. But, I think PMs will also keep doing iterations of things, right? He will increase the conversion rate by, 2%. And you're like, okay, can we do it even better? So to an extent, those projects never end either, because they want to keep doing more things, and they are still chased for more results like we do. It's just more mentality to, does this actually make a difference for this company or that company? Because there might be things that work for one specific niche but don't work for another one. And if you just take the same approach for everyone, it can be a hit and miss.
I liked your use of the word iterative there as well, because I think that's something that SEOs can certainly improve on generally, because it's very easy to think of longer term objectives such as ranking highly competitive keyword phrases. It's not something that you're going to be able to achieve necessarily within a month or two, but if you can establish those iterative goals, then is a way of benchmarking your progress and demonstrating internally the progress that you're making and that you're on the right track and you know where you're going. So if an SEO is maybe listening to this and wants to find more about what you're talking about potentially thinking more like a product manager, what would be the first steps that they should take?
Yeah, I think there are a few places then they can learn. One, there's a great newsletter called the SEO Sprint that is made by Adam Gent that only talks about SEO and product teams working together. There is a course from Pendo and Mind the Product that I'm doing right now. And even though I've been on this journey for a year and a half, I'm still learning a few things that maybe I should have learned earlier. Like there's a bit of a formal process of steps that I just learned on the go, and my brain would keep some of them, and seeing like a holistic view of those are the steps, and this is how they are named. Because like even something like the discovery, that is a normal term in the PM world, for me was just like, okay, I'm gonna write a requirements document for this idea that I had, and let's pitch to my boss. But I never thought like, oh, and now I know, oh, I'm in discovery phase. I have to research a lot of different things and come up with the list of ideas before we add new things to the roadmap. So it's not just about the next idea that I had, but how all of these different ideas stack together. This is one much easier to do and will have the same impact. And you kind of start learning, thinking this way. I feel like now every difference that I see in a product, it could be a SaaS product, it could be a website, or it could be something else. I start looking at it like, oh, there was someone developing just this feature. It's a small thing, but it makes the product a lot better. And to give a very silly example, I've been rehearsing for a talk, and they required us to send the Python version in PowerPoint. And I was like, okay, I don't have PowerPoint, but I want to make sure the slides look good. So I went there and I got PowerPoint, and they do have a feature called Speaker's Coach that actually looks at my voice pace and how many words I'm saying per minute, filler words that I'm adding, if I'm reading the slide, the information that is on the screen. So this is such a small, product feature, right? People probably would say I can do most things with PowerPoint or with Google Slides, but because of this little feature, I'm actually all down with PowerPoint now. I don't want to rehearse with Google Docs anymore, with Google Slides anymore, because the difference is so big. So once you start getting to this mindset of, oh, this is a little product improvement, those are little things that you can do to hook up the user a little bit more, you start seeing those things everywhere. So I think a little bit, maybe study a little bit and start paying attention on the things that are around you that can be framed as a product, or that are simply purely a product improvement.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2024?
Yeah, I think they should stop doing whatever people are saying that is hot at the moment, because there's a very big difference into something that is new and might have an impact. Something that is new might have an impact in 6 months, or it might just have no impact at all. You remember everybody was adding FAQ structured data for a long time. And now Google is like, yeah, we don't want them anymore. I don't know how many actually tested. Were you actually getting more higher CTR or clicks from those, or were you just adding because Google said that Google opened that option for us to add those things? So I think there's a bit of work to be done on testing and coming up with a hypothesis, so you can test what you're doing and make sure that you don't spend too much time on it if you can't find an impact.
Gus Pelogia is SEO Product Manager at Indeed, and you can find him over at Indeed.com. Gus, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2024.
My pleasure.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2024, the book, over at SEOin2024.com.